Hey everyone, welcome back to Breakthrough Innovation, where we uncover what it really takes to lead change, create value, and build what's next. I'm JL Heather here with my co host, Preston Chandler. Today, we lead Centered, a firm that helps organizations navigate complexity, spark creativity, and unlock the full potential of their teams through innovation coaching and strategy. Now, most leaders built their playbooks in a world that no longer exists. And the next 10 years will make the last one slow. The convergence of AI, demographic upheaval, and geopolitical realignment isn't a future scenario. It's already compressing decision cycles and exposing the gap between organizations that anticipate and those that react. Robert Tucker is a globally recognized futurist and innovation advisor who has spent more than 3 decades helping Fortune 500 leaders see around corners, advising hundreds of organizations across 50 on how to turn disruption into advantage. His latest book, Build a Better Future: Seven Mindsets for the Age of Acceleration, is the playbook. In this conversation, he'll share the specific mindsets that separate leaders who shape the future from those who get shaped by it, and what you can do differently starting next week. Robert, I'm really excited about this conversation. Preston and I tend to consider ourselves a little bit of innovation experts. And while we talk to a lot of people about innovation, we don't talk to a lot of people who have innovation as a core skill set. So I think this could be a lot of fun. Welcome to the show.
Wow, great to be on. Yeah, to both of you.
Awesome.
I'm looking forward to a nice show.
So
Thanks.
you've been advising leaders through waves of disruption over the last 30 years. I mean, COVID is just one of them, the housing crisis, like all these different things. Like, I think change has been the only constant.
Right.
I'm curious though, what's genuinely different about this moment? And what are you seeing even experienced executives get wrong about the pace of change?
Well, I've been thinking about this for 6 years concertedly, and the book sort of reflects my thinking in this. And I do truly believe that we have entered a different era, a new era. We've gone from the information age to the acceleration age, right? So it's kind of like when you go across the border between Missouri and Kansas there, you see the sign and it's going to be different, right? But seriously, it's going to be so fundamentally different that it's going to knock your socks off. And so what this book is about and what I'm about now is not so much innovation. That's been my life for 30 years, but it's about using innovation to prepare for this future, to prepare to flourish and thrive and prosper in this future is not going to be easy. Just in the Wall Street Journal yesterday, the president, I think it was Verizon, is predicting 15 to 20% unemployment over the next 2 to 4 years. Okay. And other pundits are looking at these things. So there are significant changes, as you mentioned in the introduction, that are going to rock our world. So how does one prepare for that? That's where I'm really focused now. So I think whether we're talking about senior executives or CEOs facing these things, I think in a general sense, leaders, the people that are listening in on this podcast, um, really need to hit the reset and think about how prepared am I for a future that is very different? Because there will be more change in the next 10 years than there has been in the last 100 years.
Well, and what are some of the things like for listeners who are listening right now? And if you are listening right now, this is probably a good time to pay attention and maybe even forward this episode on to someone else. But what are they getting wrong? How can they look at their own thought process, their own analysis of the situation, and what would they see that tells them they're one of the ones that are in danger?
Well, that's a great question. I think in fact, that's the question of the hour. What is my future? How is AI going to affect me? And whether we're talking about that on an individual level, I call that you incorporated. And we're all kind of listening on that. And as I travel around, I mean, whether it's the person beside me on the airplane or whatever, they say, "Oh, you're a futurist. Tell me, what's the future of radiology or the?" And quite frankly, it's going to be different for every industry, for every profession, but it's going to profoundly change every profession. So I think we need to do it on an individual basis And one of the chapters in the book is the futurist mindset. And this is where we stop sort of lazily kind of ingesting the news or the information, and we really get serious about your information diet. And I like to do a little I'm doing surveys all the time on people's innovation, or excuse me, their information diets. But it's what are you intaking? Because, garbage in, garbage out. I think that was invented by
Absolutely.
Hewlett Packard, right? But it's the
Yeah.
same way with information. And so many people are filling here we are, we have this huge challenge of AI and all the trends, the mega trends and mega forces that you talked about in your opener. And people are approaching that in a lackadaisical manner. And so that would be my number one thought. Number two is that you think like a futurist. How do futurists think? We don't have a crystal ball. That's kind of a surprise. A lot of people, we don't have a crystal ball. Well, what we have is a methodology. What we have is a methodology, a way of a model at looking at change. And so you can practice this model. We talk about it in the book. I call it DITO, right? It's kind of a upgrade on the SWOT analysis that we used to talk about. So ditto, DITO stands for what is the direction? You see a trend, you're driving around, you're at your kid's soccer match, wherever you are. Wow. Oh, or you hear a conversation, two people talking, or you see you go in a podcast, or you're wherever you are, and you notice a trend. Stop and say, where is this one going? What is the direction? What are the implications? Who's threatened by it? And what are the opportunities? Most importantly, because you're an innovation guy, right? What are the opportunities here? And you see, those are the people that I studied throughout my career. The people that will look at a problem or a crisis or a downturn or whatever, and they'll say, where's the opportunity hidden in this? What are people going to need out of this? And so that's the mindset of the futurist. That's the mindset that's going to get us from where we are to success in this new wave of change.
So it feels to me, Robert, like many of the leaders that I talk to are asking for the benchmark. Show me what somebody else has done in this space. But what you're describing is that there might not be a benchmark. Moving forward, if the pace of change is so rapid, maybe there's not a benchmark. And so what's your advice for leaders in that situation when they're so used to looking at a benchmark and improving to the benchmark and that benchmark no longer exists?
Give me an example of benchmark as you are
Um,
defining it there.
Jail and I help organizations change their ways of working.
Right.
And and a lot of marketing organizations are 30 years behind the times. And I often get them asking me, well, show me another benchmark. Show me somebody else who's already done that. And then I'll just
I
go and
see.
copy them. But
Right.
in this world where the change is happening so fast, there's gonna be times when there's nobody else to copy.
That's right. That's right. And that's why the innovation element is so important because true innovation, it's like people go to AI, generative AI, and, I love it. But the interesting thing about it is it's kind of regurgitating and putting words together that have already been thought, right? And so to your point, Preston, if we're talking about true innovation here, it's going beyond all of that regurgitation, right? To create a new idea. And that's the whole thing about innovation, right? Looking at existing ideas and so forth and saying, how can we go beyond that? So to your point about CEOs, everybody wanting a benchmark or a role model or a case study of success or a use case that worked out. Yeah, I get it. And those drive our lives. I mean, why be the guinea pig when somebody else can take the fall, right? And whether it works or whether it doesn't.
Yeah.
But if we're always sort of just putting our finger up and seeing which way the wind is blowing and going in that direction, we're just like a leaf being blown around in the wind. We're not going to chart our own course. And so there's a danger of overdoing that. And there's a danger of not being willing to take calculated risks in the direction of creating new value for your customer.
I do want to change direction just a little bit because I think a lot of what you're talking about requires not just one leader to change their mind. I think it requires, especially in larger organizations, a leadership team to change. And I think one of the hardest things for any leader to do is getting a room full of those successful executives, senior leaders to admit that what they're doing right now isn't working, that their existing playbook is maybe obsolete. So I'm
Right.
curious, when you go into some of these larger organizations, how do you coach leaders to have that conversation without making them defensive or paralyzing the leadership team? And how could some of our listeners do the same?
Right. You've probably heard of the expression, the fog of war, and there is
Yeah.
the fog of disruption. The fog of disruption. I love those. But it's true. I remember going to Palo Alto to work with this really kick-ass company called Nokia. You guys were probably in grade school. No, but because I'm dating myself, but Nokia was riding high. They were number 5 on the Business Week chart of the most innovative companies in the world, right? They were just so applauded. And I was invited to speak to their high potential managers at this really prestigious event. They had all the top thought leaders and so forth. But in my session, I remember asking, I said, look, if I work for you, if I work, because these were chosen from every region of the country. They were the best and the brightest, what they call the high potential managers. And I said, if I work for you and I have an idea, what do you want me to do with it? Have you spelled it out? And one gentleman stood up and he said, Mr. Tucker, he said, I would just tell you to forget about it. In this company, there's so much bureaucracy. And I'm going, this is Nokia? I mean, I almost dropped my jaw. And so, there are a couple of takeaways from that. I mean, number one, the real culture, besides the one that, is sort of portrayed, is often two very different things. But that's
Yeah, yeah.
not the point I'm trying to make. The point I'm trying to make is that when disruption strikes, you look at what is our culture. And it was a culture of optimization and growth, and it was easy growth because everybody wanted a cell phone. The following year from that event, the iPhone was introduced, and Nokia began their spectacular fall from grace. And I thought back on that meeting in Palo Alto, because you see what was happening in that room and with that culture. The reality of that was they were not a culture that was able to flex and to sort of introspect and to go, how do we truly think out of the box? Because you see, they assumed that the world was their oyster. And that's what happens when things really change rapidly. This fog. So you have a lot of argument and discussion about which way we should go. I think we should go this way. I think we should go that way. And it's very, very choppy. You don't want to be around. So, I mean, I know I'm kind of skirting around your question there, but this is the kind of thing that more and more companies are going to face over this next 10 years, these fundamental things. Do we lay off 30,000 people, right? I think one of the key things, one of your questions was about, what do we get right? What do we get wrong? And I think one of the key assumptions that companies are making right now, thanks to the great folks in Silicon Valley, is that you should take people out of the equation. Hey, that's the way to go. If there's ever a transaction, if there's ever a way to get rid of the humans, get rid of them, right? And where are we? And we're a lonesome society. We're isolated. I mean, you can plan your funeral. You can plan your everything online. You don't have to be with people. But we realize that this technology is driving us to a place that is not a good place, right? It's not. So I know I'm kind of rambling here, but these are the stakes. This is why I've gone from teaching companies how to innovate, right? Because frankly, I think the innovation train has kind of run off the rails, and it's no longer about how do I create genuine value for customers. It's about how do we make more money, right? And see, it was almost a kind of a sacred thing in the early days of the innovation movement. It was like, how can we create, as Steve Jobs would say, insanely great products that people just want to have into their lives? Now it's just become, how do we go how do we just clean up here and become billionaires and powerful and so forth? So I think there's a kind of corruption that's entered in our thinking.
No, and I would love to dig into that more. Unfortunately, we're kind of running into the end of the episode. So, Robert, maybe real quick, just to kind of leave our listeners with something they can latch onto and benefit from on Monday or Thursday after they listen to this episode. Based on your book, what is the most valuable lesson that they could take away from your book and that they could apply tomorrow?
Well, I think it's to stop making assumptions that the future will be just like the past and that we're entering the most disruptive period in human history. However, you can still have your best life, and it's going to be a wonderful life and a wonderful career. It's just going to be different. And while it's hard to encapsulate all the many lessons of the book, I think it comes down to this word of mindset. Do we have a mindset of possibility? Do we have a mindset of focus on the future? Do we have a mindset of having a vision for your life and for your company? And so I again, I'm not very good at sort of summarizing the entire messages there, but yeah, I think it's going to be a very choppy time for many people. But I also think if we stick to the fundamentals of integrity, our values, and let those permeate our lives, I think it's going to be a great period.
No, I love that message. And Robert, I want to thank you for your time today. I've really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you.
And for
Thank you,
everyone
Robert.
else who's made it all the way to the end with us, I want to remind you while you're down there leaving that 5-star review, send this episode to other leaders who might be worried about the future, who maybe need the perspective of a futurist like Robert. And let us know in the comments, what are your predictions? Where do you see the future going? And what is the disruption you're feeling right now? We'd love to hear from you. Robert, thank you again. And for everyone else,
My
we'll see
pleasure.
you next time on Breakthrough Innovation.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.